Welcome to Inflection Points, a podcast about technology and big ideas from the office of the CTO at Extreme Networks. Tim, I can't believe this is our 11th and final episode in the series. And we have talked to so many people. I've been thinking about it and I've been trying to compile all of my thoughts of everything that we've done over this entire series. And I guess my big question to you is, what have you learned? Because I feel like I've learned so much. I don't actually know where to start.
Well, I know where to start. I think the first thing I would start with is that you get so excited when you talk to guests. And you're so excited, you just can't hide it. You want to tell the guests. And I think I like it. It's quite a thing.
Excuse me for bringing some energy. I know everybody likes to call me Tigger, but I do get so excited. I just get so excited when we're gonna learn something new. I'm a nerd.
It's fine. I like your excitement.
Okay, Jorg.
Oh yes.
Okay, well, aside from my ability to get excited when meeting new people.
Hey, don't forget our inability to end podcasts.
Yeah. Well, we don't need to point out all our faults. Let's just leave it with excitement.
Oh, all right. Okay. I'm good with that.
Fine. But aside from those two lovely things that we have learned about ourselves, in all reality, what do you think we have learned about the infinite enterprise, this concept that we've been teasing apart, which it states essentially that the future sees businesses increasingly catering towards individual needs and society no longer being organized around centers? That is a fairly large concept to unpack, and we've been trying to validate it and verify it. And, what have you taken away from learning about the infinite enterprise?
So much. And now I'm on the spot. I have to come up with some ideas. I think the first thing that comes to mind is our dear friend, Mr. Doug McDonald, who is a director of technology in the office of the CTO and a healthcare expert. He had this great sort of folksy way of defining some areas of healthcare where there's value of the infinite enterprise. And I think that he talked about the check engine light.
Yes.
Right. So he comes from Detroit. He comes from Michigan. So there's lots of, auto manufacturers. And to him, this concept of the check engine light really resonated for him with the infinite enterprise. The idea that a car is bringing in all this data, like, thousands of times a second, and hundreds of sensors inside of a car. And then you get this check engine light when you need to do something about it. Why can't we have that in healthcare? Why can't the body have a check engine light? We've got things like Apple Watches. What about nanotechnology? How can we get all of that monitoring of the body so that we can have proactive healthcare in the infinite enterprise? I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, I totally agreed with him. When he said that, I went, yeah, why don't we? I mean, that seems pretty obvious. Why is my car safer than my heart? That makes no sense. But I think, but one of the things that we talked about in that episode, and then also in another episode when we spoke with Jeevan Patel, who is like the guy here at Extreme Networks that's responsible for figuring this out. How is artificial intelligence and machine learning going to really help us get to this technology in the future? I mean, he's got a lot on his plate.
Yeah, no pressure, G1.
Yeah, you got this, friend. Anyway, so when we were talking to Jeevan, he said ideas for the future are in some ways the easy parts because we can see the gaps, right? But then he said actually figuring out how to build it is the hard part. And I think that's the truth when we were talking to Doug. And I think it's fair for Jeevan to point that out, not only because he has the pressure, but then it also led me to think about, well, if we have all of these gaps and building the technology is hard, do we really think that the infinite enterprise is legit? Are we going to get there? So, I mean, I think, we need to probably go back to the very beginning. We need to go back to episode 1 to, go back into time.
Here's where the harp plays. I wish I had a harp handy. I don't, but you're absolutely right. We need to go back and just refresh our understanding of what the infinite enterprise is. And the man who came up with this concept, Nabil Bukhari, who is our chief technology officer and also chief product officer here at Extreme Networks, he kicked this all off. and he had a vision that we now have to understand and consume, and then be able to believe or not. And I think if we start out understanding his vision, then I think we can answer that question.
How would we summarize the characteristics of the infinite enterprise? Look, I'll take a little step back, a little bit of a background. Most businesses are catering to a society or to a structure that is built around two basic tenets. The first one is that there's always a center and then there's a periphery. Now, what do I mean by that? If you are related to the population, you know that there are centers of population. There are big cities, and then there are like smaller towns, and then there are like people who outlive in villages, or what we call in the middle of nowhere, center and periphery. If we talk about healthcare, well, healthcare is at the top of the mind for everybody. But if you think about it, there are big hospitals, and then there's smaller clinics, and then there are these field clinics where there's like maybe half a doctor and half a nurse out there, center and periphery. If you talk about education, there are big universities, and then there are makeshift schools out there, centers and periphery. And if you look at general enterprises, there are big centers, headquarters, big, massive campuses, especially here, in cities like Toronto and in Bay Area. There's these massive centers, these campuses where the company's culture is developed, company's experience is developed. And then there are people who are working remotely, maybe logging in from, northern Montana, or northern Ontario, or maybe out there on a beach from Thailand, but they are on the periphery and they are logging in. So the concept of center and periphery. And then the flip side of it is the expectation of the experience and the experience itself. The experience and the expectation of the experience at the center is very different. You expect a different experience when you're sitting in the university, and you expect a different experience when you're out in a makeshift school. Different experience in a big hospital, different experience in a small clinic, different experience when you're at the headquarters, different experience when you're logging it over a VPN. So these two tenets have been at the core of businesses. The event, as we described this, has fundamentally changed these two bases of businesses. There are no longer going to be centers and periphery, because people have gone back to wherever they are. They are living their lives forced to or by choice. They're living their lives in bubbles of one or two. Those bubbles are becoming the new center, and there is no periphery. The center is infinitely distributed. Individualism is now infinite. People are now thinking not in group mentality, but how their circumstances are, what their expectation of the experience is, and what is it that they want. So enterprises are going to now have to cater to this infinite number of individuals that have infinite different variations of expectations and are connected infinitely. I know a lot of emphasis on the word infinite, but I cannot emphasize it enough that this infinite nature is going to change everything about the enterprise. We being the networking people, one of the first things that will change is the way enterprises think about their networks. Rather than big campuses, small branches, or big data centers and people, with their applications out there, it's going to be a lot of infinite number of branches, but each branch is going to be equally important. And those branches might be down to the individual user. So the networks are going to have to become infinitely distributed as well. I know lots of words here, but that's really truly the nature of the infinite enterprise.
I've worked for Nabil for a long time, and I don't think that anybody has said that he is a man of too few words.
Fair point.
That's a lot to digest.
It is.
So if I am going to take a stab at summing up what I think we just heard, or what I know we just heard, he's talking about a decentralized society, which is possible because networks are making the transition possible. He's talking about a world focused on the individual as opposed to the collective, right? And he's saying to businesses, you need to react to how society is changing, and you need to react now. If you don't do it now, you're going to miss the opportunity and potentially be obsolete in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So the key question to this is the theory legit? After all we've heard, do we buy into it, Tim?
Big question.
Huge.
Yes, I believe it's legit. And here's why.
Okay.
Here's the thing. Once you get it, you see it everywhere. You cannot unsee the infinite enterprise. Once that concept resonates with you, and once that cartoon light bulb turns on above your head, you can't unsee it. What we have now are a series of proof points, right? Mm-hmm. We are seeing it around us. For example, Bloomberg recently had an article saying that people are prepared to quit over working remotely rather than go back to the office.
Yep.
Right. That suggests, I would say, that some of that has already become part of our culture. Right. We've already internalized the idea of working remotely, and I'm a huge fan of it. I do like to see people every once in a while, but that is a proof point in the media of the infinite enterprise.
Yeah. And I think, what's interesting, I totally agree with you. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I think that the media does a lot of talking about it, but they don't have a specific name for it. It's like they're leaning into it, but they don't know how to label it yet. And what actually they're labeling is the infinite enterprise. And I think, when going back to Doug, I know we referred to him before, Doug McDonald, who works in healthcare here at the office of the CTO. One of the things he pointed out is that what we learned from him was that the biggest growth area was in telehealth, and Amazon is going to get into telehealth. And that's the hospital, the doctor coming to you. That's the infinite enterprise coming to the individual patient. The idea of the check engine light being more focused on the individual and how can you help the individual rather than, the collective. And that's, I think, another great proof point that, it's starting to happen because of the pandemic. All of this focus on the individual and people not coming into the center is there. You can see it.
Agreed. And I think the big part of that is that we're not going back to the way it was before. Right. This has turned into something that people want to consume. They want to consume it that way. They're asking for it, and they're asking for more. They don't want to go back to the old ways. Same with the way we work. They don't want to go back to the old ways of having to, drag themselves through traffic back into the office all the time for no apparent reason.
It's a waste of time. It's a waste of time.
And so to that point, I think also in Canada, what we've been seeing, certainly due to all the consistent lockdowns that we've had, is that online education has arrived. To some people's chagrin, I think, but I think that will remain in place. And that there will be opportunities and viable options for online learning and home-based learning, but it'll be in concert with what's happening in the classroom. I think there's an opportunity for us to leverage the infinite enterprise to be able to expand the learning opportunities. And maybe we don't have the technologies today. Maybe they're not the way we want them to be, but they are there and people are using them. And I think that there's a need for better technology to address that experience.
Exactly. And we're not, I think what we're trying to get at is that we're not saying that it's going to be like that tomorrow, but we're saying that because of the pandemic, it has become accepted as part of society and it's been given, it's accelerated. These opportunities have accelerated and they are now taking hold and they are becoming legitimate. Homeschooling options are becoming legitimate. It's not just something that people do, in certain parts of the United States. I think also, I think the workplace, I know we keep on talking about the workplace, but people really are looking at hybrid formats. I think back to the episode we had where Kimberly Bass-Knight, who's our chief people officer here at Extreme Networks, and we also had Tamika Jean-Baptiste, who is head of diversity and inclusion over at Amgen. both of them gave us percentages of, what was the percentage of their remote workers pre-pandemic, which was somewhere in the neighborhood of 30% and 20%. And what is it going to be after the pandemic? And those percentages had increased dramatically to closer to 50 to 60%. The majority of people who are interested in a hybrid workplace are not going to want to go back to the center. They don't want to go back into the office. They see the inefficiencies. And that is where, new businesses that are going to address that are going to win. They're going to pick up some major talent that's going to be interested in working this way permanently.
So as we've gone through these proof points, what was the one thing? Was there a statement made by somebody? Was there some moment where that cartoon light bulb above your head went on?
Yes, my Tigger light bulb went on. My light bulb, I think, went on for me, and I felt very passionately about this while we were talking about what we've learned. For me, it came in episode 2 because, and that was when we had our Chief Cloud Officer, Alan Kuehler-Amrod, come on and talk about, the Infinite Enterprise and what's happening in business decisions. And he said something to me, which is simple. And being in this podcast, you'd expect that I've gotten there. But he said, we're already in it. It's already happening. And at that point in time, when we had recorded this, we were on the verge of about 9 months of being in, shelter in place, everybody working remotely. And I went, he's right. I'm already used to this new normal. I had already figured out all of these new ways of working. I had already planned out how I'm going to move forward in the next year, 2 years with the world being like this. It hadn't even occurred to me that, I thought we might go back, but I wasn't expecting in the future. And it's true. We're already living in it right now. He just nailed it.
You're already living it. It's already happened. You were already forced as an enterprise to create at least a foundation of the infinite enterprise if you're still in business today. That is what we're all facing. So then going back to what Nabil said, it's just the shades of gray or the slider bar that you have to determine as to how much you're going to go back to, say, what the enterprise was before the pandemic. But the reality of the situation is this pandemic has changed people's attitudes, people's minds, people's fears, people's concerns are dramatically different than they were 12 months ago. So you're not going to be able to force people because people don't like their lives or their health to be jeopardized. So you're going to have to ease back into this and give them options. And then also the reality of it is, and something that Nabil hinted to, the technology has become less expensive. So you don't have to hedge. It's less expensive and more readily deployable because of the cloud. You got to take a step back and think about it. There was times nobody ever thought we would need 2 cars or 2 phones in our home or 2 TVs in our home. The reality of it is, if you're going to have the infinite enterprise, almost anybody is going to have 2 networks in their home. One's going to be personal and one's going to be corporate. And by the way, that corporate one's going to have to be able to travel with them. That's the new infinite enterprise.
There it is. We are in it. We are already in the new normal. We are in the infinite enterprise. And that was the quote that really resonated for me. Light bulb on. And I think also, what hammered it home, aside from realizing that I was already in a new normal and I had gotten myself there, was his point about there was a time that we never thought we would need 2 phones, 2 TVs. Why isn't there going to be a point in time when we would need 2 networks? Why aren't we the people now going, 2 TVs? That's crazy. And now we've got TVs in the bathrooms. Exactly. So it's absolutely, that was the moment that I went, yeah, I'm a convert. I can see it. The infinite enterprise. I can't unsee the infinite enterprise because I'm in it now. And even though it's the beginning stages, we're already in it.
Yeah, agreed. I mentioned earlier on in this episode a Bloomberg article talking about people, they would rather quit than have to go back into the office. And it seems that that was heavily weighted towards millennials and Gen Z. And that they were the ones that were willing to take that action, right? Rather than just be grumpy about it and have to go back in the office. They're saying, no, that is not how I want to live my work life. I want to live it differently.
Yep.
I think that is a huge, huge point. And as a marketer, Carla, I know you have a huge background in marketing. Tell me what that means to you.
Well, for one, I am a millennial and a marketer.
You are?
And also, I am one of those people. I am one of the people that I moved to Seattle while we were recording this podcast. And guess what? We don't have an office in Seattle. So if Nabil tells me, hey, you've got to get back to San Jose and be in the office, I'm probably not going to do that. I'm pretty settled. So I'm a perfect example of that. But, as a marketer, the question is, I know there are some people like me in my generation that feel that way, but I know the generation that is really going to feel that way and already feels like technology should tailor everything to their own individual styles and their own individual needs is Gen Z. This is an entire generation that has grown up in technology. They don't feel, remote or alone from the pandemic. It's, us old folks that have the problem, millennials, and definitely you, Tim.
Thanks for that.
We are the ones who are going, oh, but we need people. This is a whole generation that's grown up not around people. And, they explore the world through connectivity, through networking and online. And, this pandemic has finally accelerated technology to something that they're looking for. And one of the people that we had on, Michelle Taffler, she's the SVP of Client Success at Gene, a Toronto-based marketing agency. And when we were talking about how do we prove that Generation Z is the market for the infinite enterprise, I went, we have to talk to a marketer. We have to talk to a marketer because they've got to be thinking about this already. If there's any industry that's already on this, it's marketing. And that's who we're going to go listen to right now. Let's go see what Michelle had to say. Michelle, I'm so excited that you're here. Really, I am personally very excited to speak with you because I'm dying to know, what do you think about how different generations are going to approach this idea of the infinite enterprise? And, how do different generations, in your view, when you are looking at how people take on and adopt new habits, what are the differences you're seeing between, the sometimes the scapegoat and sometimes beloved millennials, Gen Z, the great generation? What are the different ways that they're approaching things?
Well, it's interesting. Of course, different generations have different levels of interest, different levels of adoption in new technologies. And if you look at boomers and millennials, they always hark back to the good old days, the good old days when you could get a newspaper and, spend hours reading the Saturday paper with all the different sections spread around and your big cup of coffee. And, they remember a time when you would, get together with friends and not have a phone or be reachable. And you had the one-on-one individual time where you could be in the moment. They hark back to those days. Whereas you look at the generations of the millennials and the Gen Z, they don't have that reference point to go back to. It's not about adoption to them because they've been born into this world. They're so intimately immersed in technology that it's not so much about adoption. It's all they know. And so it's a very different mindset. I would say that it's not even about how they take on or how they feel about technology. It just is what it is. It's their life. Where you have the other generations that are always harking back to the good old days of before.
So Gen Z, they're already living in the infinite enterprise, it seems.
Yeah, that's what she said. That's what the expert is saying. And, they're digital natives and they have not been impacted by the pandemic, which I thought, for sure. I just kept on hearing and thinking, oh, this poor generation, they're not going to be able to meet people face to face or feel their feelings. No, they're totally fine. They're like, yeah, okay, take us out of the real world. We're good. We are A-okay. Because they grew up thinking a digital life is normal and not weird at all. But my other big takeaway from this was I have an expert on record indicating that millennials, and definitely you, Tim, are the old people that have a problem. You and I are the ones with the problem, but definitely you.
I didn't see that dig coming.
Yeah, but it's still effective anyway.
Hmm.
But I mean, I think the thing that we have to consider is that, like I said, they're minimally affected and they're expecting technology to address all of their individual needs. And now the pandemic has accelerated that technology. And the sooner that we accept that, the sooner we'll realize that Gen Z is fully going to embrace the infinite enterprise and expect to live in it.
Yeah, I think the proof of that statement that future generations won't see that line between virtual and real is embodied by Cloud9 Esports. So we spoke with Danny Brady. So Danny is a senior data engineer at Cloud9 Esports. And he discussed having a virtual camp. Now, that may seem obvious, but it's not necessarily all that obvious to some of us that are perhaps a little older. They are playing an esport. It's a virtual sport. And they often get together, or used to prior to the pandemic, to play in person. But these are millennials and Gen Zers who are used to playing online games. They're used to interacting online, as you said. And so that leads to the concept of having a virtual camp. You know, maybe some of us used to go to a physical camp. Now there's a virtual camp.
Why not?
And when we talked about it, Danny was interested in finding new ways to be able to provide that presence and that experience, which I think is really fascinating, because those of us that have grown up with that physical experience may not necessarily understand that. But when the people who are now in the infinite enterprise get a little older and have children, those children are also going to be living in their new normal. So they're going to inherit some of that experience and they're going to build on that experience. And I think that's really fascinating. So let's go listen to a clip of Danny and I discussing this particular idea. What would the camp experience be like? Like, what is a day in the life of a camper? Because, you know, I'm thinking, you know, a regular summer camp, there's, you know, swimming and what have you. Like, what happens in an esports camp? Or have you built that out yet? I'm very curious to understand what that looks like.
Yeah, so right now, most of our programs currently are like after school programs because school is happening, and the campers are all kids, so they're in school. So the way it works right now is there's often a set time where the teams will get together with their coaches and they'll practice. So that's like going down to the basketball court and practicing with your coach. However, you log online at the same time as your team and you play games together and review them together and things like that. Another part of it that we're building out is kind of the community aspect of it. So most of these video games, the teams are rather small. They're like 3 people, 5 people, you know, a coach. So they're a little bit smaller than like a traditional sports team would be. So we want to make it feel a little bit more like a community than just 4 other people and your coach. So we've been building out like community chat rooms and events and things like that, where players across different teams and even across different camps potentially can interact. There's some interesting things because the campers are so young. There's things like homework help and things like, you know, that you wouldn't really think of as traditional like camp activities. But since we're trying to build them into a community, those are some of the things that are relevant to a lot of the campers. So they help each other out. Wow,
that's fantastic. And what are the things that support this? What do you need? You know, we talked about the gaming servers and the location of the challenges of latency. What do you need from technology to be able to put this together? And what would be your needs going forward if you're, you know, thinking, you know, blue sky, you know, what are those technologies that would enable this camp?
So the gaming servers are certainly important, right? We couldn't do this without gaming servers. But I think the technologies that help make it feel a little bit more, I don't know, like what people are used to from camps, like the community and the camaraderie and the closeness. I think those are the technologies that matter more and need more improvement in the future. So those are things like, right, we have text chat rooms, and a chat room is fine. Everyone is used to chat rooms, right? Everyone knows how they work and can use them. But I think that's different than being in a room with someone and having a conversation. So then there's better than text chat rooms, right? There's voice chat rooms, and we use those. And those are probably better than text, but worse, again, I think, than being in a room with someone and seeing their face and seeing how they react and, you know, all their bodily cues and things like that. So what do we have? We have video calls, right? So we use those sometimes.
Right.
And again, those are better, but still not, I don't think, as good as being in a room with actual people and interacting with them in a physical space, or a seemingly physical space at least. And that's kind of the best I think we have to offer right now is, video calls. And I'm hoping that in the future, we will have something even better than that. I know people are working on it with augmented reality and virtual reality and all that stuff. So I think finding ways to make, while being remote, to make it feel even more personal, I think is kind of the most important thing that would help an esports camp versus a traditional camp, make it feel more like a traditional camp, more so than the game servers being lower latency or closer to you. I think those are less important.
So what did we learn in that conversation with Danny? I think we learned that companies want to create virtual worlds that replicate real ones, right? That's one major type of change. I think that's huge.
And I think, yes, they're already replicating virtual world or real worlds and virtual worlds. But most importantly, Gen Z is already ready to live in this virtual world and already does so. And we're moving towards this rapidly. And there are businesses that are already functioning in this. This is a known market, and the market is only going to accelerate as soon as the tech addresses the need. Agreed.
I think that is key right there, is that tech needs to address the need. What we talked about with Danny was he was running into challenges from a technology standpoint, having this distributed gaming experience, people at distance from the servers, and some people being a little closer, so they may have an advantage due to latency, right? And with this virtual camp, there's this need to be able to, as we say, replicate that real world in the virtual world, so people feel like they're having that experience even in this sort of distributed infinite enterprise experience. So again, back to the concept of tech addressing the need. It's no longer the tech driving a need, it's the need driving the tech.
Exactly.
And I think what we're seeing from somebody like Danny is that he is the one who is on the forefront of that technology, and he's seeing the challenges that need to be addressed. So he is somebody for whom the infinite enterprise is a daily experience, and he's trying to take the experience of that virtual game and a virtual camp and make it real for people who are used to living in this virtual world.
Yeah, and I think you made a really important distinction that I want to make sure that we underline, which is, for the first time in a very long time, we're not developing tech because we can. We're developing tech in response to a need. There's a clear market that that wants this, that needs this, that expects this to happen, and a generation that already wants to live this way. And we're not talking about just a collection of people, maybe half of a specific demographic. We're talking about a generation of people that are expecting this.
Right.
And want to live in a virtual world, expect businesses to deliver that virtual world. And also, more importantly, I think when you accept that it's already happening, there is a demand for it, you've got a generation that expects that, the next knock-on step of that is they're going to expect everything to be hyper individualized, as we learned with Generation Z. They want everything to be tailored to themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think when you think about that hyper individualized world, and I'm sure it's going to happen in gaming with camps, but also the place where it's been happening already and is accelerating probably the fastest in the pandemic is retail. And the second type of change that we predicted here is the hyper individualized one. And we had Kate Nadolny, who's the senior vice president at PVH Corp. For people who don't know who PVH Corp is, they basically make about a third of all the clothing in the world. You definitely bought one of their brands at some point in time. But Kate's job is to think about innovation. How are buyers going to buy in the future? What does that mean for the PVH Corporation in the future? And when we had her on, she did a great job of describing a world where the store comes to you and it is entirely designed to the customer's needs as much as possible. So let's go have a listen to what Kate had to say. The big question is, though, Kate, what is shopping going to be like in 2030 or in 2050? Are we all going to be, is Amazon going to be a virtual store that we walk into? Is Macy's going to be a virtual store that we walk into? Will people even have the need anymore to actually have that in-person experience? I mean, I won't hold you to it. I won't call you in 2050 and go, you were wrong, but or you were right. Either way. But where do you think it's going?
So I would say, I don't know if it's 2050, maybe it's 2030. I would say you're going to move from a store as a place to purchase, as a place to experience. So you're going to still have physical retail. It's going to be smaller. It's going to be tighter square footage. It's going to be a place for you to not necessarily purchase things, but to see them, feel them, experience them, have different types of brand experiences. You may want to go in, and have a stylist there who's going to be talking to you about how to wear different things for the next season versus just a salesperson trying to make commission off of the pair of jeans you're buying. So it's going to be a different type of experience. It's going to be smaller. It's going to still feel human and personal because I think that people want that. Mm-hmm. But other than that, you're not going to really be using that as a place to pick something up, right? You're going to be either getting it shipped directly to you. I still think you're going to do buy online, pick up at curbside store in the short term until drones can just drop it on your front step. But at some point, you're going to get to a place where you can get anything you want in 2 hours. So you're going to do all your shopping. You're going to make your selections. You're probably going to purchase it, in some sort of kiosk at the store, but you're not going to pick it up and take it out with you. It's going to get delivered to your mechanism, your choice of location, in your way of seeing it at some point, right? You're going to end up getting that item given to you how it's best and most convenient for you. You're going to have the option to not have it be packaged because you're being sustainable. You're going to have the option of, maybe having it be dropped off with a, registered tailor who's going to be able to on the spot make it custom to you if that's what you think you need. I think all of those different services are going to come out of it. I think the biggest thing that's going to happen at some point is all of the work that's been done with 3D printing and 3D. Right now, it's really just knitting. Weaving is a little bit harder in 3D, but there's a lot of 3D printing and knitting that's been happening. I think we'll get to the place where you're going to buy the USB port or whatever, touch port or whatever. You're going to be given that technology, and you're going to buy the IP on that technology, and you're going to print it at home. And everyone's going to actually probably have some sort of small, at that point, affordable 3D printing machine. You buy the cartridge of the yarn and the color and whatever it is you need, and you buy the IP and you make it custom to your body, right? So the technology to make things custom to your body to an extremely close degree of accuracy is already out there, but the use case for it and the integration for it is not there. A lot of times the technology just can't be absorbed because the consumer isn't ready, the businesses aren't ready, and some of the tertiary technology or secondary technology isn't ready. I think that we'll get close to that, where you end up just purchasing that IP, you print things at home for yourself. It is way more sustainable. There's no waste in freight. There's no waste in packaging. There's no waste in, additional materials lost on the cutting room floor. You're going to get it made for you and you're going to have it. I think what's also going to become a real factor in the future is truly circular product, where stores are still also going to exist as not just warehouses to ship to you, but to take back from you. So you are no longer going to throw something in the garbage or have to give it to Goodwill, although that's still a great option. You can be taking it back to the store and say, this is end of life, or this is damaged, I'm done with it. The store is going to figure out how to reuse 100% of those materials. And you're going to, bring that kind of circular model into your everyday purchasing habits.
We've had so many great guests on the podcast who've said so many brilliant things. And I think, I reflect on the entire season and I feel like we ourselves, you and me, Tim, have been on a journey, and it's been great to actually share that with the audience. With every episode, we have been learning right along with our audience and, to feel like, okay, I get it. We have proven that this is actually going to happen. We can see the seedlings of it coming together. The infinite enterprise is here, as we've said, once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And it's been just an incredible journey. And it's leading us to the conclusion that this is indeed going to happen. And it's already happening now.
It is. Yeah. We're at the beginning of a revolution in technology. We've had revolutions before, but this one is, I think, is different. This is not about specific products that are built with the expectation that users will adopt them. This is about technology addressing people's wants and needs. I think that's the key to the revolution here. This is not about technology for technology's sake. This is about technology being leveraged to address people's needs.
Yes, exactly. And I can't underline that more. Society is demanding this change. The market is already there for this change. And the question is, can we do it? But I think that we absolutely will. But the companies out there that think about the hyper individualized consumer, how can they make their digital experience for the hyper individualized consumer? They're going to win. The tech companies that think about delivering that type of connectivity, they're going to win. The companies that are not considering this right now are going to be irrelevant in probably the next 5 to 10 years. So they need to be thinking about what is their end consumer? How are they going to leverage technology? Otherwise, they're not going to be able to survive. They need to think about how can they deliver this individualized experience that usually you can only get in the store, in the hospital, when you're at work. How do they make that same experience happen on the periphery? If they can do that, they're going to win. It doesn't matter what vertical they're in. It's going to happen everywhere.
Absolutely. We are in it now. So I've had such a great time learning and taking this journey. I'm really hoping that our audience has also had that experience and taken the journey with us. As you said earlier, it's really important for us to be able to learn together. Once you see the concept of the infinite enterprise, once you're in it and that light goes on above you,
yep.
You can't unsee it, and you start seeing where you can address the gaps. And businesses often talk about the user, but I think sometimes they misunderstand that concept. They're talking about how somebody uses their product directly, not how that product addresses the user's needs and what is really important to them. And I think that's what we've learned on the journey, is that it's no longer about lip service to the user. It's about understanding needs and then delivering for the needs, rather than building the faster box and then expecting that users want the faster box. Maybe that's not what they're looking for. So really getting deep into understanding the user's needs has been a critical part of this journey.
And we saw that trend from all of our guests, whether it was Doug talking about his check engine light, whether it was Kate talking about how we can deliver individual retail, whether it was Danny talking from Cloud9 and the experience of virtual camps. All of them had the theme of thinking about what does the user need? What does the consumer need in the future? And how are we going to get tech to address that? It's there. It's happening. There are companies, major companies, that are already thinking about it.
Completely. So I think that's the thing that we're going to start looking at as we go into our second season of Inflection Points coming in the fall. We're going to start examining the future of tech and how tech is going to begin to address those key user concerns, rather than just building tech for tech's sake.
Yep. And I think it's going to be another incredible journey, because we're going to discover, what does that look like? How does it feel? And how are they going to address it? And I can't wait until our next season. I am very excited about it. And I have loved doing this so much. And I just want to thank all the listeners out there that have been listening to us. And I also think we have to thank our hidden producer, John Filson, who has been producing us for the entire season and makes us look good. So I look forward to it next time.
Absolutely. Thanks, Carla. Join us on the next season of Inflection Points, where we look at the future of networks. We want to thank you, our listeners, for joining us for Inflection Points Season 1. We've had an amazing journey discussing the concept of the infinite enterprise. Our thanks to our production team at Dialect Inc., a game and tech-focused media agency, John Filson, our lead producer and benevolent taskmaster, all of our colleagues at Extreme Networks, and all of our guests over the season. If you'd like to find out more about the Office of the CTO at Extreme Networks, find us on LinkedIn and check out the Extreme blog at www.extremenetworks.com.